were talking to a managing director at a fairly large private credit fund who took a look at a research report produced by BrightWave on a deal that he had assessed. And he said, this is identifying risk factors that I wish I had seen when we originally looked at this opportunity. It's not only the ability to speed up, we've heard this does 5 hours of work in 5 minutes.
I'm Jake Aaron Villarreal, born and raised in Silicon Valley, and here to take you behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder, the journey they're on, the problems they've solved, the products they build in an effort to make our lives better. I'm excited to have with us today Mike Conover, co-founder and CEO of BrightWave. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, excited to have you. I know we've spent a few iterations of trying to get on the schedule, and I know you're real busy, and we're busy over here.
Full dance card for sure.
Yeah, we're here, so let's have some fun. Maybe if I can, I'll just go through a little bit of your background before we jump in, and we'll have some time to talk about your origin story, then kind of talk about your company, BrightWave, here. So
Fantastic.
A little bit more about Mike. He leads BrightWave, which is an AI-powered diligence and research platform purpose-built for investment professionals. A pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence, Mike established and led open-source LLM engineering at Databricks, where he created Dolly, the language model that showed the world how easy it is to build LLMs that can talk and reason. So, Mike, you're right in the middle of this whole AI boom that's happening, and excited to learn about you. In particular, how did you initially get into technology and engineering and become an entrepreneur? Maybe just take us back a little bit into who you were as a kid. When I started this podcast, I had this vision to go behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder in Silicon Valley, where I'm born and raised. And weekly, we dive deep in the trenches to find the wins, the losses, and the lessons learned, with the hopes that it helps you run a better startup. But here's the thing. If you've gotten any value out of these conversations or been inspired at all, hit the subscribe button. And I get it. Your podcast feed's probably overflowing. But to stay up to date with what's going on in Silicon Valley, stick with us. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to build something that matters. And we're better when we do it together. So hit that subscribe button and follow us wherever you find your podcasts. Now, let's get back to the show.
Goodness gracious. Let's see. I think my whole life, I have had a really clear sense that the world is governed by systems that are more complex than we can apprehend in our day-to-day lives. And a concrete example of this, you notice that lungs and trees have similar structures. Why is that? Or that when you hold a leaf, I mean, you asked, man, you said, take us way back. When you hold a leaf up in the sunshine, you see that vascular structure, and it kind of looks like city blocks. That's weird. Why is that? And so I think for much of my life, I was confronted with these kinds of observations that intuitively seemed mystifying. But as an adult, and particularly in graduate school, I discovered that the tools of computation and mathematics can give us really tractable answers to those questions. So it turns out that both of those things that I described are space-filling fractals that are solving very similar problems. So lungs and trees are both interested in gas diffusion. And that branching structure where you have a central base and then many offshoots that fill a three-dimensional space, that's a very efficient way to respire. And cities and leaves, or like even slime molds that are growing on a surface, are concerned with the distribution of nutrients. And you can think of cars and people and information as sort of flowing through the vascular structure of a city. And with this science that I studied as part of my PhD, complexity science, you can model these systems and understand processes like how diseases spread on the airline network. So pandemics, or, my work was focused on how information spreads through very large groups of people. So we had access to the Twitter data set very early on, and we're looking at large scale structures of communication networks, on the order of hundreds of thousands of people. And it was just a lifelong fascination with what I thought was something that was just innately beautiful about how the world functions, that grew into a sense that we can actually start to change how we behave on the basis of what we learn using these analytical techniques. And we can make more informed decisions about policy with respect to, should we shut down the airline network in the case of a pandemic? It turns out the answer is no, and you can prove that statistically. Or how are technologies like recommender algorithms going to shape the structure of society? It's like those are tractable problems in the face of data science and machine learning.
Yeah, wow. You've got a lot of deep knowledge there. Transitioning from that sort of mindset into getting into technology and then
Yep.
working at Databricks, like what was the transition from that to a tech company? And what was it that you learned there that you felt like, I think I could make a jump and go start my own company?
Yeah, and so a little in terms of timelines, I've been building AI machine learning systems for almost 20 years at this point. And fresh out of school, went to LinkedIn, worked on homepage newsfeed relevance there. So you go to linkedin.com, you'd see our updates. But still had research interests, was a research liaison as part of their economic graph challenge. And, BrightWave, just to make clear, is a system that is able to perceive more than a human is able to and reason about the contents of very large data rooms or collections of documents, whether that's private market investors who are looking at due diligence in a deal process, or a long-only investor who is confronted with a coverage universe of 80 to 120 plus names, and during earnings season is just drowning in a sea of data chaos. And the through line is bodies of information that exceed the limits of a human's ability to connect the dots. And that's like what all of this has in common. So at LinkedIn, we published a paper in Nature Communications, so one of the top scientific journals in the world, using 500 million job transitions. So you can think of a resume as describing a network where you move from company A to company B, and we draw a line between those two companies based on how many people move from company A to company B. You can predict next quarter changes in S&P 500 market cap based on where high talent individuals move. That sort of realization, that manifestation of the fact that you can model these systems and then make meaningful predictions about the world. Obviously, the 2010s were characterized by the sort of growing commercialization of that fundamental paradigm, which is that you create systems that instrument the structure of the world, whether it's mobile devices and geocoordinate data or impression and action tracking for consumer web, and predict what is going to happen in the future on the basis of very large data sets. And so after I left grad school, the through line was really, how can we use machine learning to make better and better decisions about how to act? Now, the challenge up until 2020s roughly, the Transformer paper came out in 2017, but these models really became useful in the 2020s, was that you historically had to field a team of PhDs and machine learning engineers to do anything about these data sets. And with language models, you have a system that is able to, if you think about, and this is kind of a technical digression, but like the attention matrix in a language model is able to see, language models don't read left to right. They see the totality of a passage simultaneously. And that is so different from how humans interact with the world. And so with the advent of ChatGPT, you saw the potential of a system that was able to really deeply understand bodies of content that exceed what a human is able to do. And you even just at the order of 128,000 token context window, that's 100 pages of text roughly. And a model is able to see all of that at once. That's just such a transformative technology, even if it doesn't, absent agentic behavior, that moment was so galvanizing for me in terms of conviction that this class of technology would change how we interact with the world, and that it would change how we build the kinds of systems that we use to make more informed decisions about how we should be in the future.
So if you look at the type of systems that have been in the space that you're in, which is really pulling together a lot of data for investors, doing diligence and trying to assess, should we bet on putting our money in this company or in that company, or what type of reports can we pull together that are going to be more accurate as we predict where we think
Sure.
our growth can be? What was the problem that you saw that wasn't already there in the market that you felt you could apply with BrightWave to help, solve or provide value in that space?
So I think it starts with the human element, and any, sort of in the context of the audience and focus of this podcast, like you have to start with pain. What is it that people are doing currently that is either not a great use of their time, is tedious and time consuming, is just the thing that you as a technologist can say, there's a better way. We don't have to do it like this anymore. And in finance, the problem of getting to conviction, the number of factors that are relevant to an investment decision are numerous. And, you step in pre-term sheet, let's say you're a private credit investor, pre-term sheet, you step into a data room of 600 to 800 pages of material. That's a board consent. That's going to be shareholder agreements. It's a confidential investment memo. It's, vendor contracts. It's just all of this raw signal, but without any structure on top of it. And you are in a competitive deal process. You need, it's frequently these are leveraged investments. And so getting it right and understanding quickly, is there a deal killer in here? Or can we put on this decision with confidence quickly? We've historically just thrown warm bodies at the problem. And you've got these young associates and analysts who work extremely hard to make sure that there are guarantees around comprehensiveness and accuracy that are really at the limits of what a person is able to do in the course of a week. And you read 1,000 pages of content, or even just browse through 1,000 pages of content, it's very difficult to connect the dots across all of that material. And that's where language models and a system like BrightWave is so powerful in terms of augmenting human capabilities. And our view is very just like concretely that AI systems do not replace investor judgment or experience. And instead, it's much more like that accountant in 1978 who would manually write out spreadsheets longhand. And you go to that, this is before the advent of VisiCalc, which came out in 1979. You say, first computational spreadsheet, what is your job? They said, well, I run the numbers. It's cognitively demanding, it's time consuming, and it's important to the business. It feels like real work. But with Excel, we have a tool that is just the dominant solution to that class of activities. And it is not the case that there are fewer finance professionals because Excel exists. And I see a very similar sea change with respect to the sophistication of the analysis and the perceptiveness of the kinds of questions you can ask a management team, because you're stepping into the discussion armed with all of the material facts.
Yeah, I could see a really good value proposition of, where's the pain in the process and what tools or technology can you use to accelerate how you get to the answers that can give you better, a better feeling of making those decisions. But how did you jump from LinkedIn or Databricks or 20 years of,
Yeah.
technology into the financial tools that really are helping financial analysts or
Yeah.
financial people in that sector? Like how did you see the opportunity there?
Yeah.
And why is it important to you?
Well, the markets are the ultimate manifestation of how humans negotiate value. And it's not the only way that we account for value, but it is a very important mechanism for doing so. And it's just fundamentally an interesting problem. And just as an example, prior to BrightWave, I used to do algorithmic sports betting. And not a lot, but was using machine learning models to price MMA fights. I like to box,
Oh, wow.
I like to wrestle, and there's a lot of good data on what's happening in the course of
Right.
UFC fights. And that problem of pricing something and knowing something about the world that nobody else has noticed is just intrinsically interesting to me. I just find it to be an interesting problem. And you connect that to all of the, what I shared about this sense and the statistical reality that our lives are governed by very complex systems that are really only with computing technology. It seemed very natural to apply this to the markets and these investment decisions. It just seemed like and in addition, the pain is really real. I think in contrast to I don't know what the Uber for dogs is for the AI era, but there are a lot of things that look like that where it's like, that's kind of interesting, but it's not that the problem is not that acute.
Mhm.
And you think about the hourly rate for a lot of these investment professionals and the opportunity cost of not doing higher order analytical thinking, or not having time to source and identify new deals, or not having time to really invest in the relationship with the management team to understand on a human level, are these people we want to do business with. It's a pretty high opportunity cost. And so the fit between technology, what I find intrinsically interesting, and then the need for the market made it a pretty clear decision.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of money in that space. So, any way to get an edge to help you make a better decision when you're placing big bets is certainly worth exploring and experimenting with. What's the product actually look and feel like? So,
Yeah,
if you're just, on a laptop or going through it, like
sure.
walk us through the visual if you can.
Well, so let me step back and talk a little bit about what AI products feel like generally and how different BrightWave is from standard issue AI product. Chat as a form factor, such exceptional product market fit so quickly that the industry and a lot of businesses have become really fixated on that as the main way that you interact with AI technologies. It's a very powerful paradigm. It's great at iterative, fast feedback loops that allow you to refine and very quickly direct the sequence of questions and interactions. But the design problem that we solve at BrightWave is, how do you reveal the thought process of a system that is operating autonomously and has considered tens of thousands of pages of content to a human in a way that's useful and interpretable? And that looks much more like a knowledge surface and what we might have historically considered a data product than a chat interface. And so you step into BrightWave and you are able to define blueprints that allow you to apply common investing templates to large collections of documents. So if you have an investment memo worksheet that anybody is, you're going to spend 20 to 40 hours filling out, what's the fundraising timeline? What are the management biographies? What's the growth model? What are international expansion plans? What are the key risks to this business? What's the ask? A lot of that material is spread over so many different documents. And you're doing this for every look that your company, your fund is taking at an opportunity. The ability to perform a deep research like autonomous parse of this body of content that in the form of a data room and get highly configurable templatized research outputs, that is not a chat interface. That's a configuration system for defining what is the deliverable, how should it look and feel, what should it focus on. That is fairly different from, I'm typing all these questions into ChatGPT and having to, get 500 words at a time, 1,000 words at a time, and copy and paste this into a PowerPoint. Additionally, we have developed a lot of new product experiences, user interaction experiences that I think are fairly distinctive. So in BrightWave, in addition to our sentence level attribution to the underlying primary sources, these really high quality citations, we have an interaction where you can highlight any passage of text and say, tell me more about that. Where's this coming from? Show me the evidence for this. What are the implications of this? And it's like in Photoshop, you have brushes. This is like the ability to take any piece of a living document and expand on it. It's like a magnifying glass for text. And you're able to pull a thread that catches your attention. And that's one of the ways that we put our money where our mouth is when I say, I don't think these systems replace investor judgment. Instead, I think you get to brass tacks 50, 100 times faster. And then when you see something that connects with that conversation you had that was not digitized, it was just that hallway conversation with management, you say, this is material. We need to talk about this. You're able to instantaneously get the information that's going to drive your decision on an opportunity.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. What's been Or maybe you can share some feedback from customers that have tried BrightWave and,
Yeah.
walk us through that a little bit of how it differentiates from what they've already used, maybe other tools out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think let me first start with some of the feedback we've heard from customers. We were talking to a managing director at a fairly large private credit fund who took a look at a research report produced by BrightWave on a deal that he had assessed. And he said, this is identifying risk factors that I wish I had seen when we originally looked at this opportunity. And so it's not only the ability to speed up, we've heard this does 5 hours of work in 5 minutes. It's just such a material force multiplier from a velocity and team bandwidth standpoint. That's one real way that we create value. But there's also this making sure that no stone is left unturned, and that those factors that you wish you knew about when you did a deal, that those are the first things you see. So our ability to BrightWave is fairly different from other products in this category in that we've developed a technique that allows us to, in a computationally efficient way, read every page of every document every time. So contrast this with consumer grade language models that use lossy search techniques. You would call this like retrieval augmented generation, where it's kind of creating this montage of like paragraphs or snippets from documents and trying to piece something together. We use language models to read the entirety of every document for every analysis we perform. And that allows us to provide guarantees around comprehensiveness and accuracy that are just really hard to touch. And so it's a combination of things that differentiate us from, we're not the only team that has recognized that this is a real problem in a huge market. But when you sit down with the product, and where our customers sit down with the product, what they're telling us is that this looks and feels different from anything else I've used. This is so much more articulate and so much more dialed to finance specific workflows and how I want to interact with large collections of content, and that the accuracy and the quality of the analysis exceeds anything else that's available from the market. And that, I mean, this is, obviously I think that's true. We work very hard to make sure that that's true. This is what people tell me. A lot of buyers are assessing 4, 6 of these options in this class, and we consistently hear that the analysis that BrightWave puts on is just more insightful, more accurate in terms of tone and voice, and just more information dense. And so those those things make it an easy yes for pretty choosy buyers.
Yeah. Who are the buyers?
Yeah, so we are really focused on private market investors who are stepping into data rooms that have large bodies of material that, goodness, you got to get up to speed real quickly. And this is our core market.
Yeah, got it. Really cool. You've raised some, is it seed funding, or have you actually?
We've raised $21 million in the past 20 and change months. We had an inside investor preempt our Series A. We've backed by angels from OpenAI and Databricks and Uber, Solana Foundation, as well as some of the largest asset managers in the world.
Really cool. You got great backing. You've got a team. What's the biggest challenge for the company currently?
Oh, goodness. It's a long list of things that keep me up at night. It's no one thing. It is, what is this class of technologies? What is this market? What is this opportunity? I think there are no reference implementations. If you're building a Salesforce killer, you basically know what are the knobs that a CRM must have. And you basically know how databases are going to function next year. What is the most effective user interface to control such powerful systems? How will truly agentic processes shape the contours of these products when we have end-to-end reinforcement learning over tool use for workflow specific applications? How will reasoning models complement what seems to be a saturation in pre-training? Those are very urgent, very complex questions that we grapple with every day.
Yeah, there's this transformation that we are seeing very quickly about agentic AI and marketplaces for agents, and hiring agents
Yeah.
versus hiring people, where you have customer support and you got sales agents, and you have marketing agents, and you've got financial analyst agent.
Yep.
Like, it's really coming fairly quickly.
Yeah.
As your tool or your platform continues to evolve, do you see it as an agent, or do you see it more as a tool that's helping knowledge workers do their job better, faster, or more efficiently?
It is a tool that helps knowledge workers do their jobs better, faster, more efficiently using autonomous agentic reasoning. And I think that the thing that you buy at the end of the day is a deliverable. With respect to agents, right? Cursor is a great example, the code generation platform. You're buying the pull request. There's like a lot of like, how do I make the sausage? But what I want at the end of the day is correct, tested code that is merged to master. And we take a similar view with respect to our customers. Autonomy and agentic behavior there are user-facing considerations. So these are typically longer running processes, whereas chat is very fast. It begins to stream as soon as you finish asking the question. You see, what has this done for me? Is it on the right path? Agentic systems, and we see this with some of the really long-running tests that OpenAI has disclosed, we might be looking at hours or days. So there are ways that a user experiences an agentic system differently. But at the end of the day, as a finance professional, as an investor, I don't care how the sausage is made. Like you can pay crowd workers so long as it's accurate and insightful and useful to me. And so we actually don't, and this is in part also just my co-founder, he was the former CTO of a federally regulated derivatives exchange and clearinghouse. His first deep learning patent was filed in 2018. We've got a NeurIPS published research engineer on the team. We've just got like 9 feet of methodological options behind, the first 3 things we tried don't work. We've got 6 more teed up. And so I don't feel any particular need to get too hung up on like, what do we call this algorithm? How do we do it? It's just, does it work or does it not? It's super simple for us.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like you've got a really deep bench of talented people.
That's
And
true.
in today's world, you don't need a ton of people to do a really good job on technology, in particular in AI. It seems to be that we're seeing small teams really bring some value to the markets quickly and raise hundreds of millions of dollars very easily. And, as long as they're solving a problem,
And
all's
our
good.
philosophy on capital is that you let, capitalization follow needs and value creation. And I don't need to say much more on that, but on the team front, our philosophy is very much that you hire a smaller number of more experienced professionals and that you're able to move faster as a result, largely because of 2 things. One is that they are able to make the right decision the first time. And so you're able to prune the search space very quickly based on the experience of these individuals. And then the second is that you enjoy lower coordination costs. So if you think of the number of relationships in a business, it grows with the square of the number of people. And with AI technology, you're seeing smaller groups of people accomplish, weeks worth of work in days. And I think we are in a privileged position. So the individual who oversees our front-end development, he led Instagram's integration with the Ray-Ban sunglasses and Oculus VR headsets. We've got folks from McKinsey and Goldman Sachs and FT Partners and Scale AI on our commercial team. We hired the cloud architect from Anaplan to lead our infrastructure efforts. We've just put together a very stacked bench and people want to be a part of that. And because of the experience and also the technology that we leverage from an AI efficiency standpoint, you're just able to get more points on the board faster with a smaller team.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's a fun place to work. We show up to these beautiful offices and, 5 days a week, there are people in here and it's just a fun place to be. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Having your experience at LinkedIn and being able to understand talent, in
Yeah.
addition to a great story and really high level individuals that are part of the team now, like what's been something that you can share with other entrepreneurs that's been helpful as you recruit and grow and keep your team small but very efficient? Like what's worked well for you to attract the right people?
That's a great question. And I've thought about it a lot. LinkedIn was an incredible place to learn about culture. I think that was a very special business under Jeff Weiner's leadership. And it percolated through that entire organization. Strong people have great options. And so I think the talent conversation begins with a really candid discussion about whether what we're doing is a good fit with what you're trying to accomplish in your life. And I see life all in as a portfolio optimization problem. There's your family, there's your work, there's your personal passion, there's what are your current skills. How hard am I trying to work right now, candidly? And all of those factors are immutable on short time scales. And I think when you get into some of the real DNA stuff in terms of who are you as a person, are you intrinsically motivated to do something exceptional? Do you take an orientation to the world around you, which is an ownership mindset, and accepts that you can't control your circumstances, but you always get to choose how you respond to your environment? There's a real source of strength that accompanies that recognition of where the locus of agency is in the world, and that's inside you. I can teach you PyTorch. You can learn how to stand up a Kubernetes cluster, no problem. Are you an agent? Are you an actor in the world? Do you happen to the world, or does the world happen to you? That's much harder to learn on the job. And so I think where we start and where candidates who get the chance to speak with BrightWave see how differently we show up is, right off the rip. What are we talking about here? Who are you and what do you want to do with your life is the conversation that sets us apart. We've got an incredibly interesting technical problem. We have a market, that is basically boundless in size, and we have a technology that works. And the thing that I think is most special in spite of all of those factors is the way that we treat each other and how seriously we take getting the right people on the team who have a mindset that is keyed for success and for pushing real hard.
Yeah, that's great. I think a lot of times when companies grow and hire, and we've been, I've personally done 20,000 interviews with candidates and gone through a lot of sort of learning around the mindset of someone is it's a lot of times they might have the skills and experience and they might be a good fit for what you want them to do, but do they have the right attitude? Do they have the right mindset when it comes to challenges you're going to go through? And are they going to continue to fight to deliver and come out on the other end versus I've done my job, I can do the best I can, but at the end of the day, I'm just going to try and, and that's where it ends. And I think that the companies we've seen, we've worked with a lot of startups, the ones that have done well is that they find the right team that they all are fighters in some capacity and they don't take no for an answer. They find a way. It's a founder's mindset. They almost encompass the company as their own. And I think that's really important to find. It's hard to find it, but if you ask the right questions, and it's not always, here's who we are and here's what we do, can you work with us? It's are you truly interested in what we're bringing to the market? Because if you're not, you can work for 10 different companies, but they have to really believe in the leaders, and they have to also have to believe that they can make a difference and be interested to want to be there to make it successful.
And I think there's a lot to what you just said. There are a lot of little pieces in there. And one of the things that we hire for is a demonstrated ability to make things work. So there's people say, listen, I'm not interested to speak with job hoppers. And it's like, well, what is it? What does that tell you about a person? If you've had multiple stints of less than a year and a half or 2 years, and what that resume, that fact pattern on a resume tells me is that you stepped into situations where consistently you were not able to figure out a way to push through something. Something came up and it was, instead of, I am going to react, I'm going to embrace the autonomy and agency I have and figure out a way to make this work and solve this puzzle, I'm going to walk. Now that impossible situations happen, but do you have a demonstrated track record of acting with intention and making good decisions about who do you spend your time with? What kinds of businesses do you bet on? And then even if you get a bad break, are you able to create success from bronze, when we put gold on offer, goodness, I know that, we're going to get magic out of this process. The other piece is I like to hire people who will exceed the limits of what we have to offer, and where their talent and their ability will lead them to decide that BrightWave is no longer the place where they can accomplish the fullness of their potential. And the idea here, and I got this LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman and Jeff Weiner talk about this a lot, the idea of a tour of duty where your trajectory will eclipse what you can do at this business. But I want to work with you for a window in time and change the slope of that trajectory and give you a career experience that is career defining, but not necessarily need to hold on to you for 9, 10 years in order for this to be a productive transaction. And I think that sets the tenor of the relationship, which is that you are an incredible person and I will work hard to earn your partnership and recognize that you are destined for great things. And that may not be here.
Yeah. I like that tour of duty, and we read that too. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I mean, you progress as a person and as a company. And, at some point, one outgrows the other, and you have to decide, like, okay, it's a good time to make a separation or maybe evolve and become a leader for the company in a different capacity.
Well,
so really insightful for the listeners.
Like on that topic, I think so much of our lives, if we do not act with intention, can be characterized by, like, there are a lot of relationships professionally that unless you make a point of it can feel like we're having a conversation at this level, but really what's going on is some subsurface dynamic that we're not talking about. And I think that's a really unhealthy way to live your life and a really unhealthy way to run a business. And to your point about leadership, I think executives and even leaders, not just executives, but leader at every scale of an organization, set the high water mark for that team. And everybody pattern matches on, culture is what you tolerate. What does this person find acceptable? How do they behave? How are they showing up? How are they talking about culture? What matters? And you have this need for authenticity in the workplace that I think is frequently not met by the ways that we show up for one another. And so when I have a conversation with a candidate where I'm like, what are you trying to do with your life? And I really want to know the answer to that question. That sets the tenor for the whole relationship. And we're gonna keep having that conversation. If what you want to do with your life is start a company or break into a different industry, how can we set you up in a way that is mutually beneficial so that you can pursue those objectives and the business still succeeds because you spent time with us? Now we're having the real conversation. And you don't have to pretend like you're never going to take another job. And it's not this cynical bargain. And it creates a sense of trust, and trust is consistency over time. Now we can have the hard conversations and we can talk about what's really going on. What are the real problems that we face as a business? How are we going to solve them? And I think that's a much more interesting way to work. It's a much more interesting way to live your life.
Yeah. I was listening to, ironically, a podcast a few months back, and it was about leadership, but it was also about investing in the people that you hire, but also expecting a return on your investment. So, you spend a lot to get the right people, but you also expect them to stay for a certain amount of time so that the return on what you've provided, there's a mutual benefit, but also they're not here for 16 months or 18 months and they're gone. And you felt like you didn't get out of it what you want to do too. So I think there is a mutual side of that ROI. But at the same time, I want to go back to the leadership question you talked about, because as a leader of a company, and that if that company evolves, at some level, the leaders also evolve. So for you particularly, how have you evolved as a leader when you started, maybe in your career or maybe your company, and where you're at today? Like, what's a breakthrough that you can share that you've learned that you're using that's been really good to kind of learn?
Yeah, I think the biggest evolution that I've gone through as a person, and it is catalyzed by my professional life, has been an embrace of humility as a source of strength. And did you ever listen to Run the Jewels?
Yeah.
Yeah, rap group.
Yeah.
There's a lyric which is, "You can't crush me, I'm dirt." And I think that it captures very like succinctly how I feel about humility, which is that I'm wrong about most things already anyway. And to the point at the beginning of the conversation, the world is vast and unknowable, and I'm just a speck of dust floating through space on the surface of this planet with really limited faculties for understanding what's actually going on. Like, you and I are having a conversation. I don't know what your internal monologue is like. And we're like both really trying to be present with this dialogue. Now multiply that by everybody you've ever met, all the conversations that they've had that you're not party to, all of the facts and data that it's just very much a scientific approach, which is, can we falsify this hypothesis? I believe something may be true about the world until I get evidence that contradicts my hypothesis, and then I discard it and find one that's more useful. The orientation there is the knower versus the learner mindset. And this, again, comes from LinkedIn, and an individual, a coach there, Fred Kaufman, he talks about that idea that embracing that my source of strength as a person does not come from being right, but rather from getting the right output from my process. And that if you say I disagree, or here's data that contradicts what you think we should do, or your plan is garbage, we need to go in another direction, it's like, I believe that you are a reasonable person generally trying to do the right thing, and that you have information that I need. So my job is not to convince you that I'm right, but rather to elicit that information from you. And now I can with great facility adapt to new information and update my model and my priors that allow me to behave more expertly in new situations. And so with respect to the startup journey, that approach, that humility, which enables me to step into a user research call or a sales discovery call with a beginner's mind and say, like, listen, if you think this is a bad idea, you're right. Like, I don't need to, there's this idea that if only customers would just XYZ, and that nobody's going to just do anything. Either they love it and they want to use it, or you need to change how it functions. And that, rather than clinging to ideas about, how the product should behave, or what market we should focus on, or how we should operate as a business, instead, we happily kill our gods and move on to, it's like things that you really thought were true. It's like, if the market tells you that's not true, just believe the market, and that is a very efficient way to get a lot of reps on deck as a business. And so I think that's, a very long running through line, and one that has definitely shaped the way that we are building BrightWave.
Yeah, that's great. You've got a lot of good knowledge, and like the space you're in, I know that I don't know specifically with financial analysis and understanding all the data that's going to make it a good bet on a deal, like how big that opportunity in the market is. What I do know is that there is a ton of companies that are aging out. Where you've got a lot of people that are retiring that have built pretty good sized businesses. And there's no one to take them over. So in the private equity space, I know there's a lot of growth over the next 10 years. And there's going to be a need for lots of tools and technology that's going to help them make the right choices. So I just think timing is such an important factor of whatever you bring to market. And if that aligns well with the solution you're bringing, it just helps gives you an advantage in success.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have the timing right. Now it's about executing and getting the brand out and growing the company. So really excited. What are you excited about as you look to continue to build your product in 2025? We're already in March, but for the next 10 months, 11 months, 5 months, whatever it is, what are you excited about as what's on the roadmap for the product?
I mean, we are building the definitive platform for understanding very large bodies of investment research. It is the same thing that we've been doing for months and months now, which is executing monomaniacally on this vision for a system and a user experience that allows you to deeply understand tens of thousands of pages of material hundreds of times faster than was previously possible. There are a lot of really interesting subproblems, both from a product development standpoint as well as technically within that space, but we have really winnowed the field, and we say no to a lot of really interesting stuff because if it's not painful, it's not prioritization. And our plan is really well defined, and it all lines up around creating this system that has never existed before. And that when our work is done, I do believe that the way investment professionals approach the market will not be the same.
Yeah, really cool. Well, if anyone wants to find BrightWave or find you, Mike, where do they go?
BrightWave.io. Reach out on LinkedIn. We are hiring high talent, experienced professionals across all job families, both commercial and engineering. We tend to fit the job to the person rather than the other way around, because we hire for intrinsic attributes rather than specific technical skills. And we, to the extent that you're interested in changing your approach to investment research, get in touch.
Very cool. Well, there you have it. Mike, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think it's phenomenal what you're building, and can't wait to see what happens in the future. For all the listeners that are listening, thanks for spending your time with us today. It means a lot to me that you've spent it with us. My name is Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to catch up with you all in the next episode. Until then, Mike, the world, take care. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Follow us on YouTube, where we go behind the scenes to learn what it takes to be a startup founder.